Hello and welcome to the last in our current series of On the Road.
In today's programme, we go back in time to a deserted village where only the church lives on.
We meet the world-famous explorer Sir Ranulph Fiennes to discover who his secret hero is.
And we ask why step-parents are always cast as the wicked villains in our fairy stories.
But first imagine you live in a remote Dorset village and suddenly the Ministry of Defence comes along and tells you have 2 weeks to get out without any prospect of ever coming back. Well, that's exactly what happened to around 200 people in 1943 at Tyneham.
In 1943, the War Cabinet decided they needed a larger area to hold troops ready for the D-Day landings. And after they looked all around the south coast and various other places, they decided that this area, Tyneham Valley, was an ideal, big enough area to safely train troops. We still need to train troops, in particular armour, and therefore we need an area to carry on doing our battle skills before we send men overseas to do peacekeeping duties. As the range officer, it is my job to meet the military requirement for training, look after the conservation in regards to flora and fauna, and allow as much public access safely and as frequent as possible.
I'm rector of this village, and services take place here about 3 times a year, and people seem to come here out of affection for the place. They may have had links here in the past with members of their family that used to live in this village, or it may be indeed for them a place of pilgrimage. And our generation may, out of loyalty to a previous generation, return to this very special place, as they do on Remembrance Sunday. The church is full. It is the only working building left in Tyneham. We're surrounded with ruined buildings, the rectory, the manor house, and all the post office and surrounding cottages. I know that the local community are very supportive of the army, of what they've done in terms of conservation, and they have protected this very precious stretch of land. Although it may sound very destructive with the sound of gunfire, there is a creative role, a positive role. The tragedy is, of course, that we have failed as a society worldwide to live in peace one with another. And we have to have these means of protecting ourselves. Now, there may come a time, and the church is all about that time, when we will learn, when we will mature and be able to live at peace with one another. And it will be at that time then we can trust one another to look after this landscape without destroying it.
Well, I never came here to school, but I remember coming to Worcester and dances in the evenings and come in. It used to be nice and warm in here and everybody was laughing and chattering. And the schoolmaster, he used to arrange it, and Louis Longman, that lived in Bortington Farm, she used to play the piano for us to dance, and we used to have lovely times here. We all had to move out in a month, so all the cattle had to go into, and the people had to sell them cheaply because the dealers knew that they had to sell, so we didn't get a very good price for any of the cattle. It was a very sad time. We were all worried and wondering where we were going to live, and the army kept taking us to different places to look at houses, and we were all saying, have you got anywhere to go, have you got anywhere to go? They didn't mind turning out, no. They'd rather do that than for Hitler to come, yes.
Well, the Christian faith is all about sacrifice and giving one's all. And in order to ensure peace at the time in 1943, the village had to be evacuated. I mean, there was no call ever for compensation. There was no bitterness from the population. They knew for the sake and the love of their country they had to leave.
Tyneham village, and actually the valley, is particularly relevant at this moment in time with the peacekeeping duties in Bosnia. The actual hillsides and the valley and the derelict buildings are ideal to practice battle skills required before they are deployed with UNFICYP or the various peacekeeping forces that they do now. While we need to train young men to go on peacekeeping duties, we will stay here.
The truth is that they're here to ensure peace, and that surely is a fitting tribute to the people who used to live here.
As the vicar Maurice Strike said, Tyneham is a very special place. If you'd like to visit the village, the Army allows free access every weekend, on bank holidays and the whole of August. It's well worth a visit.
Every child from about the age of 3 knows about Cinderella and Snow White. Both of the stories deal with wicked stepmothers and wicked stepsisters. What villains they all were. But with 1 in 3 marriages now breaking down, about 2.5 million children are in step relationships. Some work well, but as the old legends suggest, jealousy and rivalry can make things very difficult.
Once upon a time there was a young girl called Cinderella. She lived with her father and 2 stepsisters.
Snow White lived with her wicked stepmother, the Queen, in a castle at the edge of a deep green forest.
Well, with me now to discuss this further are 4 people, all of whom are in stepping relationships in one form or another. Welcome. Karen Dunn has 3 children by her first marriage, and she now has 3 stepchildren by her second marriage. Martin Wells is a psychotherapist. He also has a stepdaughter. Neville Boundy is the vicar of Cotton Parish Church in Bristol. Nev, I think you've got 3 stepbrothers, is that right?
That's right.
And Denise Knowles from Relate, the organisation which counsels people who are having relational problems. Denise, I suppose in a way these days you might have been counselling the equivalent of the wicked stepmother, the wicked stepfather, or even the wicked stepchild.
All of them at different times, yes, and I think we're seeing an increasing number of people coming in who are experiencing difficulties within a reconstituted or a step family, extended family, call it what you will. And a lot of the problems come about because they're actually having to consider just more than their nuclear family. So it's very, very complex.
Now, Karen, you've got personal experience of that. You have 3 children by your first marriage,
Yes.
and your new partner has 3 children also. Do they live with you?
No, they don't. My children live with us. My husband's children actually stay around the corner with his ex-wife.
That's very close, isn't it?
Well, he felt it was better to stay close to the children. That way they didn't have to come for a set weekend. He was always there. If they had a problem to discuss, he was there.
Martin, as a psychotherapist, step relationships must enter some of the work you're doing. What is the key problem, as you see it, that emerges again and again with step relationships? I mean, is it the wicked stepmother, or much more than that?
Well, I think there's an element of that those stories were attempting to give some expression to. And I think the key problem is that what might be expressed in quite a natural way, like jealousy or envy or conflict, competition, then doesn't easily get expressed and then gets seen as bad or wicked. So I think perhaps those stories were an attempt to talk about what is actually quite normal and natural in any family, and particularly in reconstituted families.
Reconstituted, what was it you said about reconstituted? It sounds like
Something to do with
wartime eggs, yes.
Like 9 eggs in the war.
But you prefer that word?
I prefer the word because it describes a little better to me what actually happens when 2 families come together. That there's a restructuring and a reconstitution of the family, and in the word is also the suggestion of a readjustment and of a need to communicate about these things.
I think this is something that we've got to be aware of, is the effects of reconstituting a family, trying to integrate 2 families into one, if you like. The effects on the children is something that we've maybe ignored quite considerably, Because when a couple meet and they would like to get married or they'd like to move in together, it happens, I won't say it happens very quickly, but it's their decision. And very often the children are ignored in that. Their thoughts and their wishes are not sort of taken into account.
Now, Nev, you've been remarrying people for some 20 years now, haven't you?
Yes.
When people come to you and say they'd like to be remarried in church, has it been part of your conversation with them about the effects on the children of remarriage?
Not nearly enough. I mean, when I first started in '75, and I tried to talk, in fact, to the then equivalent of Relate as well as other people, nobody raised the question with me, and I certainly didn't, of what this was doing to the children. And it's only much later that I've come to realise that children, as it were, in a marriage that suddenly takes place, are in a very difficult situation, far more difficult, in fact, when there's marriage after there's been a death.
I was just thinking that Denise made an important point when we were talking before about that there's a high investment, of course, in the couple coming together, in things going well, and there may be a honeymoon period, but they may not be there for the child who may be feeling there's an intruder in the house. And how do I deal with that real conflict of feelings between wanting things to go well for mum or dad, but also feeling an antipathy just to the person being there, regardless of their personality or how well things are going.
Karen, how well did your children adjust to having another person around who was very close to you?
And not very well at all. They were used to having me all to themselves, and we were doing things together, just the four of us. And then they had to adjust, and my eldest daughter was spending a lot of time with me in the evenings, keeping me company and watching TV together. And then somebody else was coming in and taking her place.
So in a sense you'd had an adult relationship with her?
Yes.
And then when your husband came along, she was demoted back to child?
Yes.
And that really caused problems?
Well, yes it did. And she took to shutting herself in her room then, which she still does to point. But with the boyfriend now. So
And some your children are friends, aren't they?
Yes.
And you can sometimes hear what's going on in your own families through the children of the other parents.
I think it's not just actually sort of the parents that need support, you know, in these sort of situations, but the children, as we've mentioned earlier on, the children do need support. And I think if they've got friends around them that they can talk to, and children are pretty good at talking to each other about emotions and about feelings, and they can say, I really don't like this, or I really hate it when such and such happens, or I'm not very happy about something. That sort of finds its way through to me and finds its way through to Karen. My children will talk, and Karen will say, did you know that Elaine's doing this? Or did you know that so-and-so is doing such and such, you know? And I say, well, no, I didn't. But it helps us then to maybe ask the right questions of our children to actually enable them to open up a little bit more.
Martin, I imagine one of the problems of this must be that the absent parent often becomes the ideal parent, and they're ideal because they're not there and the child's forgotten actually what they're like. Do you find this a constant factor in all this?
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to have ideal parents and idealised images of parents, so it's not something that I want to, in a sense, to be rid of, but the difficulty comes then for a step-parent to match themselves against some ideal parent that's no longer there.
My first son, my eldest son, is actually from my previous marriage, and his father disappeared off the scene, and 20 years down the line, we've always been up front with Martin, my eldest son. He knows the facts and figures, if you like, but he sort of 20 years, as I say, down the line, suddenly said, I'd like to find my natural father. It's any child that's been adopted, for example, or any child that doesn't know of their natural parent has an aching, has a sort of a little slot within here that they have to fill, and the only person that can fill that for them is the biological and natural father or mother that's missing.
And of course there are extra sets of grandparents, extra complications with arrangements, communication.
Yes. Holidays, for example. I have to check when we're going on holiday with my ex-husband and his wife that it's okay with them, that they haven't planned anything. And also with my husband's ex-wife, that she's not going anywhere where he would have to have the children. So it's not really that simple planning a holiday.
I mean, I heard one horrific story just now from one of my colleagues who had friends who have a stepdaughter, and each parent of the stepdaughter had assumed that she would be with them that coming Christmas, and they both independently arranged to go away. You know.
So imagine the effect that's going to have on the child. You know, nobody wants me, I'm being abandoned, and again, that can sort of riddle through their life, like a stick of rock really. It's there, you know, it's all the way through.
Yes.
Another factor I think you're touching on by talking about the absent parent is something that I think isn't always dealt with as fully as it might be, is the question of loss. So we were talking beforehand about if someone dies, then we have rituals and we have a way of talking about loss that enables people to grieve. If there's divorce, we don't have any rituals, we don't really have any way of acknowledging the loss. So for the child to be able to really talk about and grieve the loss of the parent that's no longer there really helps the attachment to whoever's come in and taken their place.
Would you agree with that, Nev, that we're better at dealing with bereavement than divorce?
I'm not sure we're very good at dealing with bereavement, or even worse with divorce. I think it gets all papered over. And I'm sure that, I wish some research was being done on the effect on children in education. We know they're affected very badly. You know, we're all colluding, trying to pretend that divorce doesn't matter, that there isn't all this pain, there isn't all this wreckage, and we don't look at what's happening to children when the parents are split up, where the concentration span and the pain may be just as great and just as disruptive.
So from your collected experience, what do you reckon helps
what
most?
To do?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think what people have got to realise is they've entered into a different kind of a relationship, and that it's not a failing. It's not a failing at all if you ask for help. You've been thrown into a situation that you've maybe never ever experienced before, and unless you get some support and you get some information and gain some knowledge about how to deal with it, you're likely to always continue to make errors. And I think we could learn from actually asking for help, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Himself a hero to many, Sir Ranulph Fiennes is described in the Guinness Book of Records as the world's greatest living explorer. I caught up with him recently at the Cheltenham Literary Festival. Sir Ranulph, who is your hero?
It's a guy called Wilfred Thesiger, who's still alive, into his late 80s, and did things back in the 40s and 50s which were shattering expeditions at a time, you know, when he didn't have all the mod comms that explorers do today, and just is, through his books and the photographs that he took, mostly black and white, in my opinion, the greatest British explorer around today.
How has he influenced you?
His early journeys in Arabia led me to a lost city, him and gossip from Arabs that I met when I was in the army out there, to try and find a lost city which got lost about 3,500 years ago. And because I was fighting the communists in that area and had some sort of spare time, when the communists were sort of having Islamic rests, I used to start trying to look for it. And it took me 26 years and 7 or 8 expeditions before eventually finding it in the sort of early 90s, really inspired by him. The qualities of Wilfred Thesiger is that he is iron hard, and nothing that the Arabs can't withstand, he can't withstand. And they are hard guys, the Bedou. They've been brought up in a very hard environment, whereas Wilfred Thesiger came from the UK and went out into that environment. Admittedly, during the Second World War, he was in the SAS and he'd had hard things happen to him. But nonetheless, he ended up being able to do everything that the hardest Bedou could do in their own environment. And as another UK guy, I'm very proud of him and his reputation out there. So when I got out there in the 60s, over 10 years after he'd done his great empty quarter crossings, they still remembered him. They still called him by his Arab name. And so you, coming from the same tribe from the UK, got the residual ripple benefit effect from him. But unless those early people had withstood those tests, they wouldn't be able to act as a yardstick so that you can judge for yourself how much you can take in a responsible manner.
Is it true he asked you for directions afterwards?
Yes, he couldn't find his way out of equatorial Cheltenham. As today is the last programme in the current series, we thought we'd take a look back at some of the people and places we've visited around the region.
So here are a few of our favourite moments.
My sons, Theodore and Ezra, we go for walks in the mornings, often very early in the mornings, across the fields, and observe things happening in the landscape. The landscape's always been important, even though it's difficult now to see it within the context of my work being really abstract, but it's the source of my work. But I'm just looking. I'm soaking it up like a sponge.
And all the icons remind us that we never worship just as a local community, but the whole of heaven and the whole of earth together as one community. Each icon is also a reminder that not simply that we take a glimpse of heaven, but more definitely that heaven takes a glimpse at us.
The way the synagogue is constructed is that the women sit upstairs and view the ceremony and don't participate. And in the middle of this painting, I've put this giant aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is a silent letter. And to me, it's that kind of symbol of the presence of the woman's voice, but not the sound of it, maybe.
A woman's voice that is there but isn't heard, you mean?
Sort of, yeah. A woman's voice that isn't heard in public normally. And I suppose that also mirrors the kind of woman artist who hasn't been heard publicly.
Yes, and these are your own apartments. This is where you live yourself.
Yes.
This looks like the desk of the President of the Universe. It's huge.
Yes, I think it's sort of based on Star Trek.
And what's behind these curtains
Ah,
here?
well, that is, you see, it's also a bedroom.
Ah.
And just by pressing a button,
Aha!
it opens up.
And did you have all this recently done?
Since my father died, I think I moved in '94. Here, the dining room area.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone.
Well, there's a lot of people that go by and they'll look at you and they'll give you a smile, and then what they'll do is they'll go for their purse and then they kind of walk off. They kind of, it's like they put their hands in their pocket because they feel slightly guilty about it, and then they kind of disappear again.
Usually the people that do give you money are the people that haven't got it, funnily enough. I mean, people that do have money don't tend to give you anything anyway, like, you know.
Really?
It's usually the people that have been there or close to where I am that usually are more prone to hand something over, like, you know.
My religion is everything to my life. That's what makes me smile all the time. So I try and be happy. I know it's a bit hard for people to be happy, really, because so many people leave their happiness to when I find a boyfriend, when I find a girlfriend, when I get a better job, when I get more pay, and that's not happiness. Happiness is something that comes from within you. You could have no money, you could be sad, you could be lonely, but that happiness still shines through all that. I think the most important thing in this world is to be happy.
Now, Rosie, I know you thought I was very shallow when I chose David Bowie as my hero, but we never found out who yours is.
Well, Andrew, I think after Mahatma Gandhi, really. I think it has to be you.
Oh, Rosie, thank you. I'll give you the fiver later on. That's it for today's programme, and indeed this series.
We've enjoyed being on the road round the region.
So until the next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.